Tento panel bude ako jediná časť dnešnej konferencie v angličtine, ako sme informovali na pozvánke, takže teraz prejdem do angličtiny. Welcome back after the break, and I'm very happy to introduce our international guests, because somehow our guests from Czech Republic are, at least in my feelings, not so international. I still think about this Czechoslovak kind of thing, but now we have real international guests, and I am very happy that they were so kind as to find the time and arrive. I also have to excuse the Slovak member of European Parliament, Mrs. Monika Beňová, who was willing to come, wanted to come, but unfortunately it was not able for her due to the commitments in the European Parliament to arrive. Maybe she will arrive sometime in the afternoon, maybe not, I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, here we are in this panel with these two guests, and I'll start with Marta Tycner on my left side, who is a historian, economist, and a member of the Polish Razem party. Razem means together. And currently she is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford and lives between Oxford and Warsaw, right?
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
Not anymore, no. But it used to be some time ago. No, I'm now working for an international campaign in organization, so I moved to activism full-time.
Wonderful. Yeah. Just wonderful. Okay, and to my right is Luka Mesec, who is a Slovenian politician, and before that he used to be an activist and leader of the of eco-socialists, and now the party is called Left Party, LAVICE, right?
LAVICE, yes.
Since June of 2017. Luka Mesec was elected to the Slovenian National Assembly, which is parliament, for the first time in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. And he is the coordinator of the Council of the Initiative for Democratic Socialism, Labour Fund University, and its successor, the Institute for Labour Studies. He advocates...
That was before. Those organizations are dead now.
Oh! So, sorry for that. So that's
I already ordered our guys to update it.
So your current position is the leader of the party and a member of the parliament of the Republic of Slovenia, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So now we have the correct information. Thank you. And I will start with you, Marta. It's not the first time you are here, so we are very happy to have you here again, but something changed since the last time you have been here in regards to the Razem party, because if I remember correctly, in the last election cycle, you in the party decided to run on yourself and not to be in a coalition with other left parties, which did not went particularly well, unfortunately, and there was also a strong criticism from the left side of the spectrum. Am I right?
Yes, it's correct. Even though it's always a question like, what does it mean it didn't go well? So the thing is, Razem was founded 4 years ago, before the past election, as a project of a renewal of the left and as a new initiative, and indeed Razem did not join a coalition organized around the Postkomunist party, the Polish Postkomunist party, the alliance of the democratic left, it's called like this, and in the end, it's true that both of these projects, let's call it like this, they didn't get to the parliament in the end. The thing is that to I don't want to excuse myself or justify it too much. It's just that a new project, needs a first election. So it's always pretty hard to, start something and then immediately
succeed.
No, not succeed is one thing, but immediately
Evaluate.
Yeah. Go into coalitions and drown in them in a way. Razem did not manage to get to the parliament, but got public funding, which was a big thing, which was the first time for independent left in Poland to get public funding. It required 3% to pass the 3% threshold. And afterwards, like between 4 years ago and now, we have an election coming in 3 weeks. There were 2 election moments, local elections and European elections, and in both of them, Razem attempted to run on their own, on our own, and it indeed went not well. This time, I can say this because the outcome was worse than this 3.5% that we had in the first on the first go. So it's true that like going down from 3.5% is not really the best outcome. Yet the situation was that there was no other choice really. This was one thing, because the political scene in Poland got more and more polarized between the government and the main opposition party, building around themselves a big bloc of everybody against the government. And the opposition party, the Civic Platform, it's a center-right liberal party. So it was obvious that a party like Razem could not join this bloc because it was just not feasible, and it's still not feasible. But this was the only alternative for quite some time. Either join this huge bloc of everybody against the government, or run on our own. So so we did decide to attempt suicidal missions. And but now recently, in the beginning of the summer, after when the opposition, so the leader of the opposition actually, so that this strategy, which is actually very similar to what can be seen in Hungary in a way, that there is this like ever-growing coalition of parties aligning against Orban, that it's just not working, and he gave up this strategy, and for the first time, the post-communists separated from them. And it was the first moment when anything, slightly bigger on the left could be even attempted. So obviously there was this point that Razem was created as an alternative to the post-communists. That's true. And that post-communists are not exactly the partners independent left would like to have, for all the reasons I think everybody knows in this part of the world, including all you can only think of, right? Huge corruption scandals by the government, dodgy business arrangements, let's call it like this. I don't know, sexist politicians, all this stuff, right? So it's really hard sometimes. It was really hard to think about it. And what has changed apart from this decision of the liberals in a way? So I haven't mentioned the third player on the left yet. So this building of the left is to run together for the next election. It's a project of three organizations. So the post-communists I mentioned, Razem I mentioned, and there's Wiosna, spring. It's a meteoric project of one of the Polish mayors, Robert Biedroń, and he launched it before the European election, so in spring, very adequately. And with this plan to storm the European Parliament, storm the Polish Parliament, and probably run for president next year. But it didn't come out as expected, and he made many mistakes. And also his project is, even though the polls were not too disastrous yet, but it was going down and down. And also in terms of finances and people, it's just a very weakened project right now, if not non-existent really. So we had 3 parties. One which has been in which used to be in government last time 12 years ago, and was outside of the parliament and was at least partly ready to make some changes, or at least I hope so. Another one which was just still existent but only on the screens of televisions really, and the third one which is really struggling to have any impact whatsoever on the political scene. So yeah, so we had it made these three forces come together. For Razum, because I'm speaking from this perspective, not passing the 3% threshold would mean losing the public funding, and it would just mean the end of this party as it is right now, and a change or a transition into a movement, probably. So it happened, this launch of this electoral project, it happened in June, and it's not a coalition. It was supposed to be a coalition, but the threshold for coalition is 8%. So the Postkomunists were too afraid of it, because this is how they didn't get to the parliament last time. They didn't pass the 8% threshold, so they were too afraid. And what they proposed was to that they run as themselves and invite other partners on the electoral lists. You can do that in Poland, and this is how it's organized. It's a fake coalition because people think it's a coalition, and it also has a name as a electoral project. It's called Levica, but it's not a name of a party. It's a name of a committee. So this is how it's organized. Razum got more or less 20% of high places on the lists, a promise of 20% of the money, if there is any money to divide. And also, what is probably the biggest success of our poor negotiators, because the negotiations were really hard, is that Razum's unofficial, but yet practically leader, is number 1 on the Warsaw list, which means he's actually leading this whole project. I will stick to this word. Even though, so he's the number 1 person of this committee, but the entire campaign is organized around this picture of 3 men, unfortunately, coming together from different streamings of the left and uniting their forces to propose something new. And what is also a big success of Razum, and I'm really proud of that this time, is that in the negotiations, the outcome of the negotiations or the program were pretty much how we expected it to be. And it's really good. I mean, it's not a radical program, unfortunately. So there is no basic income in it, or no 75% tax threshold or anything like that, which we had in our program, don't we? But there is nothing openly non-leftist in it, even though our partners are very, very mixed in terms of their views sometimes. And it's very pro-social, even though I can refer to this later. The governing party is launching and promising one after another new social programs. So this mixture of right and left we have in Poland, so it's not easy to propose something against them. But it's a decent social democratic program. And for the moment, the polls are good, are surprisingly good. It's between 10 and 14%, which is unexpectedly good for anything leftist seen over the past years in Poland. And the main achievement is, I think, right now that the duopoly is broken. So the media narrative, the perspective of the voters has changed from this quasi two-party system we've had for, I don't know, 8 or more years, to at least for a while to 3-party political scene. If you listen to the news, it's so different. You hear news about what Kaczynski is doing, what Strednej is doing, the leader of the liberals, and then what Lewica is doing. And it's like this is the new pattern of narrating politics in Poland, and it's so refreshing, to be honest, because this was one of the main reasons why all the any leftist initiative was so difficult to launch and succeed. However, the price of it, or circumstances of it, are that this left-wing project is for the moment only eating up the electorates of the liberals. So, as from what we can see from any polls and assessments, there is virtually there are no voters coming from the right to the left, which is the disappointing part, right? But it's also why, for example, the news or the media are interested in this at all, because it's the collapse of the liberals that allows for this situation. Their campaign so far is absolutely hopeless, and with good results of the left, many voters switch between the two. Okay, I will finish here. I think it's enough for the introduction. This is how the situation looks 3 weeks ahead of the election.
Okay, so only 3 weeks to go.
Yep.
Okay. So a follow-up question. In your opinion, is it possible that this kind of shifting of voters from the liberals to the left project could help the Kaczynski party, please?
Help in which way?
To stay in that way.
I mean, it doesn't change much for him, right? Because it's just how the opposition is.
Okay, so the numbers for peace seem to be the same?
Yeah, they seem to be the same, or even slightly growing, but not on the expenses of the left. Because there is no overlapping of
understand. Okay, but just in the parliamentary mathematics, is it going to change something?
For the moment, it looks like there will be the law and justice government with a majority on their own, or even slightly bigger one, but not a constitutional majority. It doesn't look like this. However, it's not impossible. It's okay. Yeah, let's put it like this. It's not impossible that something might be slightly different. It also, we have 5 parties running altogether. So apart from these 2, there is also the Peasants' Party. It's a conservative countryside-based country, usually around 5-6%, and fascists, so parties to the right of justice. And the question is, for example, whether they pass the threshold, both, or one of them, or none of them. This changes the arithmetics a lot. But I would not count on that. I mean, if you're asking me if we can defeat Kaczynski,
No, actually no. I'm asking something else,
okay.
And I'm trying to be the devil's advocate here. That if you are not actually helping Kaczynski in some way.
I mean, we're doing our job. I mean, we're just being left, right? And like helping or not helping Kaczynski, this is what the liberals is their play. I mean, this is what they're so obsessed about, and this is their only electoral program, to be honest, like to be against the government. So I'm sorry, I overreacted a little bit because like being Kaczynski's secret supporter is one of the basic insults we get all the time. Doing this or that, and maybe not supporting the liberals. But also in terms of electoral arithmetics, I think it's just not happening now.
As I said, I was trying to play the devil's advocate. It's not my opinion. It's thank you. Luka, Mesec. It seems to be that Slovenia is quite different to Poland and Hungary and even Czech Republic and Slovakia. Our not previous, but some electoral periods ago, finance minister was having her lecture here before this panel, and one of the things she said was that Slovenia is the only post-Soviet East European country that did not adapt this kind of neoliberal Washington consensus transformation thing in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me, and congratulations, of course, on organizing this conference. It's refreshing to hear someone pronouncing my surname correctly abroad, so thank you also for that. About your question, I agree. Slovenia is basically not post-Soviet because there was a break between Tito and Stalin in '48, so Yugoslavia had its own path. But if you are talking about post-socialist East European states, I would say that Slovenia is or was the least neoliberalized of all. Basically, when I was driving here, I was thinking about when I was the last time in Bratislava, and I figured out that it was in 2003. So basically, I come to Bratislava every 16 years. The last time I was here, I was 16 years old with my high school mates. So for the most of the time, I was drunk. So don't ask me any questions about it. It was the New Year's Eve. But now, coming 16 years later, more responsible, and so I see basically a lot of similarities especially between Bratislava and Ljubljana. It seems to me like they were kind of, if they were same city once upon a time, but then its citizens did something horrible and a furious God would divide it, not to come back together again. So basically I would say that Slovenia and Slovakia are resembling, but not so much. In your case, the power consolidated in 2006, and now you have this SD smear in power for the last 13 years, and as far as I know, they are holding the power quite strongly, but they lost the presidential elections, which is maybe a crack in their power. In Slovenia, it was vice versa. We had a transition that was led majorly by two parties. On the left side, center-left, was the Liberal Democratic Party. On the right side was Slovenian Democratic Party. You know, they were all Democrats in the 90s. But transition was in main brought in by the Liberal Democratic Party. They were basically social democrats, so they rejected the neoliberal agenda at the beginning of the 90s. Your ex-finance minister before said that I should say hi to Jože Menzinger. He was finance minister at the beginning of the 90s. He's I would say, the most honest Slovenian economist, and his good deed was that when Jeffrey Sachs came to Slovenia to sell his neoliberal agenda, it was Jože Menzinger who intellectually and politically defeated him, so that Sachs' agenda did not go well in Slovenia, and as consequence, for the most part, the public property was our infrastructure, key systems like, I don't know, the biggest supermarket in Slovenia, the biggest banks and so on, they were state-held until the crisis. Well, what happened then? In 2004, for the first time, the right wing came to power, and I said to Alina before, when your finance minister said that maybe you should infiltrate the SD smear and try to reform it from within, or maybe there will be some shifts within the SD. In our case, LDS, that was that center-left party who was in power for 12 years, what they did is very similar to what is happening here. They installed their oligarchs in key systems. They were holding more or less all the instruments of power tight in their hands. But when they fell out of power in 2004, they just killed each other and the party collapsed. So what we have now, we have ruin of that big party. And currently, the center or the center left is in power, but in form 5 parties, 5 centrist parties plus us, the 6th party. So when you talk about my functions before, maybe it's worth mentioning another that the right wing conscribes it to me. It's the coordinator of the government, because they see it like that. We are not part of the government, but we are supporting it. The most prominent or the most significant policies of this government were something that we forced them to do. So in last year, we managed to get a raise of minimum wage to 700 euros, plus all the add-ons like weekend shifts, night shifts, and so on should be paid on the top of that 700 euros, not included in that. So that is one achievement. The second is that social aids, minimum social aids, were raised to 400 euros. then we managed to abolish more or less all the austerity measures and prevent the government from imposing new ones. And currently we are pressing the government to abolish the supplementary, that is commercial health insurance. We have a particular system. Let's say our health system is public for the main part, and for 75% it is paid by public insurance. But if you want to get a doctor, you should pay also the supplementary insurance, that is 420 euros per year. And no matter if you earn 10,000 or 30,000, or if your pension is 400 euros per month, you should pay that part also. That is supplementary insurance, health insurance that is collected by commercial insurance firms, and everyone is obliged to pay it if they want to have a right to doctor. So we are now pressing them to abolish that, and that is the biggest battle that we are trying to win currently this autumn. So maybe a step back to answer about your dilemma, power versus responsibility, and how did we come to that. I would put it like this. When Slavoj Žižek taught us, when you are in Matrix and Morpheus comes with a red or blue pill dilemma, you can take the red pill, stay clear, be an activist, keep your good soul, faith, and so on. Or you can take the blue pill and become one of them, but you will have the power. I would say that when that happens, you should always, as Slavoj Žižek taught us, demand the third pill. So that is what we did with the government. The case in Slovenia was like that. 2018 we had elections, and the right-wing party won. The SDS party, that is the one I mentioned before, but the leader, Janez Janša, he's like the leader for, I don't know, 30 years. He's like Slovenian imitator of Viktor Orban, also his good friend. He get good funds from him and so on. And he's a very interesting figure. He was a radical leftist at the end of the 70s, turning into human rights agitator at the end of the 80s, turning social democrat at the beginning of the 90s, turning conservative at the end of the 90s, turning something like slightly more liberal in the 2000s, and now turning far-right leader that is imitating more or less the AfD and parties like that. So he won the elections, and with brutal agitation about, disgusting agitation about refugees and so on, and I would say Nazi agitation about freaky leftists and so. So all the Slovenians were like, or for the most part, like 75 or 80% of Slovenians are like disgust with that party. So the center couldn't afford to let him collect enough votes to gain a coalition. So first they tried to make negotiations with some minor right-wing party, and that minor right-wing party got in, and they stole a lot of time, but at the end they said, no, it's not enough, we will not go. And then they called us. They knew that we were the troublemakers, but the time was running out, 1 week to form a government, or else Janez Janša will get the mandate to do it. And they were really pressed. And they said, okay, well, we should maybe try to do it with Ľavica. So we were called to negotiations, and we had basically 1 week to write a new agenda of the government, and to make everything, you know, who will take which ministry, blah blah blah. And we said, oh, okay, we'll play the game. So we started with negotiations, and we sat there for one Sunday, and we said, okay, minimum wage will be 700 euros, and they said, okay, check. We said, okay, we will abolish flat tax rates for the capital incomes and make it progressive. Okay, our friends from big firms will not be the most amused, but okay. Then we said, well, we will also cancel all the buyings of armed vehicles and so on for NATO, which are you planning? They said, okay, we can make some concessions here, but not really. But their play was basically, okay, we will write down, all your demands, but, at the end we will have the government and you can wipe your ass with this paper. But what we did is we knew that the key are the budgets. So before the budgets, we pressed, and they couldn't get enough votes for the budgets elsewhere. So basically, the budgets were, now we are confirming the new budget for next year, and the budgets were the line when the government is getting, how to say, a mandate for the next year, or is not getting a mandate for the next year. So we managed to not get into coalition, but to get leverage over coalition, because they are all signed under those demands. So now when they say, well, you are forcing us to do some things, we say, no, we are not forcing you. You said, we promised that we will do the things, and for now it goes on. But it's, how to say, it's tough, and it demands a lot of political struggling. But yeah, okay, that's how the situation looks in Slovenia right now. In short. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
One follow-up question and one proper question. The follow-up, the decision to indirectly take part in the new government, that was approved by the parliamentary party or by the members, or how it was done? Because you said you had only 1 week.
And one?
You had only 1 week.
Yeah, 1 week. Yeah. Yeah, we have some deadlines in Slovenia. After the elections, the president of the state gives a mandate to someone to form a coalition. And then he's given, I believe, 45 days to do it. And then they started negotiating with, how to say, very neoliberal, business-oriented right-wing party who stole most of their time. And then they had a problem because there was no other partner and they had to turn to us. So we stepped in and made a deal in 14 days. But we said our concession was at the end. We said, okay, what we wrote down is not enough. So that is why we will not join the coalition, because we believe that you will sell the banks, and they did. And we believe that you will probably not give us those concessions about NATO. They are trying not to. So we will not step into your government, because we will take responsibility for all that. But we can support your government if you do this and this and this. We will confirm your budgets.
Okay, so
that was the deal at the end.
So you didn't need approval from the party?
Or from our party?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
From the membership?
Yeah. We made a referendum in the party.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was there any kind of trouble or problems or emotions in the party to making such a move?
Yeah, but they were in the opposite direction, because people were amazed. Whoa, we have our program literally rewritten into coalition agreement. So there was not so much of skepticism towards the offer of the leadership. The offer of the leadership was, we bluffed, for the coalition partners, but within the party we said, well, we will not join it, it would kill us, but we suggest that we support this coalition because we got something to work with. But there was a part of membership who said no. We got a lot, so we have to go in and take key ministries to push the agenda further. But I'm very strongly in the position that third pill was the correct position, because if you are in the government, you are very, very constricted. You know, now we can play the game with the government publicly because we are part of position. But once you are in, all the problems should be dealt with within. And if you form a party and you got in such situation, I recommend very much not to go into the government for at least a mandate or two to see how the things work, because those guys are fucking dirty. So.
Okay, so my next question is partly answered, because you said that joining the coalition would kill you.
Yeah.
And that was actually my question, because there is a lot of discussion about the so-called infantilization of politics and about all this emotional stuff. And if I would think about your situation, for example, in our circumstances, no matter if you join the coalition or not join the coalition, you are either with us or with them, and who is with them is against us. So how is your electorate digesting mentally this situation?
Yeah, I would say that the electorate is a bit, I would put it this way. You have two types of left electorate in Slovenia, and I believe that also in Slovakia and wider Europe. One part is the old, let's say, people with nostalgia for old socialism or old social democracy. They are more or less economically left, but socially more conservative. I would call those people social democrats. Then, on the other hand, especially within the younger generations, you have the descendants of the new left, let's say 68 and on, who support feminism, environmentalism, animal rights, and so on. I would call them the new left or progressive. So the social democrats and progressives, they are not really compatible. And I believe that what we are dealing with in Slovenia is that our base is mixed, you know, because we are trying to do both. We are trying to renew what was once called the class struggle. That is what is appealing for the social democrats, the minimum wage, abolishment of that commercial health insurance and so on. And on the other hand, we are very strongly addressing environmental issues. I'm also a vegetarian, so I'm talking a lot about animal rights. And so we were leading campaign for equal rights for LGBT people in 2015. We were the only party who was saying that refugees are also people, because for the rest of them, I believe that that line is somewhere else, and so on. But the Social Democrats are in part, or possibly in large part, are rejecting those policies. They're like, no, that is not our cup of coffee anymore. So they are more or less supporting the center-left parties. So right now the situation is the progressives are totally with us. The Social Democrats would rather see us in the coalition than in the position we are currently in, or outside the coalition, because they want some conservative but social democratically stable government, so to say.
Marta, after hearing about Slovenia, let's imagine that something wonderful will happen and peace will not get the majority. Would you rather be part of a coalition with the right-wingers, with liberals, who are anti-Kaczynski but also not left by any stretch of imagination, or in some kind of arrangement like in Slovenia?
I think this is, for our current coalition partners, I think this question is absolutely obvious. What they want to do is they want to form a government with the liberals. I mean, the Postkomunists, Videozáznam, this is exactly what they want to do, this is why they are running. So if only there is possibility, they'll do it. I think Levica's position is the best possible I can imagine for a party like Razum. And if it's only possible, I will totally, if I have an influence in my party, I will totally push for it. And to be honest, I would also push for it with Kaczynski, which is maybe a minority position also in Razum, but it's not something so exceptional, because you can do such things, you can try to do such things. You know, it's a very socially progressive government. Oh, no, very socially progressive. Okay, for like Polish standards, right? It's the only government which actually reversed austerity in any areas, and substantially reversed. But obviously, in terms of human rights and social and things like this, it's an absolutely disgusting government. But yet, it's a very similar position, right? You can try to push other parties or something. But maybe it's more of like a provocative statement than anything else right now. But I do believe that it should be taken into consideration. I think going to government with the liberals is a suicide for Razum, because to have a majority in the Polish government, in the Polish parliament, you need to have let me count, over 230 something MPs, right? And if we are good, we'll have 10?
As Razum, not as the...
As Razum, yeah. If we're good. If we are like bad, we have 3. So within the government, this is just a non-existing power, and you can be offered, I don't know, vice minister of something, and then you just sign up to everything they do, and they do disgusting things. So there is no point really, right? Whereas from the outside, well, there's an opposition to this part, to such government, or as in this supporting position. It's a completely different situation. But yet, you know, if we met 1 year ago and you asked me if we ever go together with Postkomunists, I would say no. And then we also had a referendum on this, and over 60% of our people said, yeah, we should do it in this particular situation which is there. So it changes, like it can change within a week or a month. And the possibilities, even with only 5 parties, the possibilities are really numerous.
Okay. You said it would be a suicide to go to the government with the liberals, which I probably would agree, but then again, my question, and I will be a little bit philosophical, so indulge me. It is not more important to be loyal or to do something about the situation in the country, even if the cost is losing the party or the position of the party? Is it maybe not even immoral to think only about the party?
I don't know. You know, I see it from a completely different perspective. From a perspective of a very small project, which is slowly growing, and there is no. I don't think like we should take responsibilities, any responsibilities, as soon as possible, or no matter what costs. This is the entire idea behind this is different. You know, it's to make this progress step by step, to widen the narrative, to shift the discussion, and then finally, after, it's a very logical step to be first a party outside of parliament and then opposition party in the parliament. Only after, just, Luka said it, I think.
It
Right.
is,
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
So, and also, you asked me in the beginning, the very first question, like that it was, it didn't work out well, that we didn't join the post-communist in the beginning and so on. But organizations just need time to get ripe, for some things, and I think we are like strong enough right now to, for example, sit at the table with a party which is like the post-communist party of Poland, right? It has this huge history and structures and experience and whatsoever, and just bring our program and say, look, it was okay on a different level, but it's just, we have this piece of paper, we want to do that, and we were like able to push it through, right? But we wouldn't be able to do it 4 years before. And it's the same on each level, I think. I strongly believe it. And if we join the government and we just don't know how these things work, we've never been in the parliament, nobody. We've never been in government. We just don't know how governing works, right? We can be cheated on and betrayed and I don't know what else you can do with your partners not to be vulgar all the time, right? So I really don't think so.
Thank you. You mentioned that there are ruins of once mighty, let's call them social democratic post-communist party in Slovenia, right? And you were not particularly sentimental about the party, probably for a good reason. But some people, for example, in Czech Republic, they are very sentimental about the Czech Social Democrats, which are probably going to die anyway.
Yes.
And my question is, in this context, how important is it? Is the party for you in comparison with the ideas, with the real politics? Is the party just a vehicle, or it should be some ideological entity that lives a long life and the leadership changes?
Yeah, I would say that it is also good, always good when the old dies off. I would say that, like people, also institutions and parties should have a limited time of existence, because after some time they become, if there's not renewals and so on within the party, limitations of the mandates and so on, the old people are going out voluntarily, the party gets corrupt. In Slovenia, maybe just for clarification, that LDS party was not. We had two left parties basically. One still exists. The Communist Party itself transformed into Social Democrats, and they still exist. They have the same amount of votes as we right now. That is 9% currently. But that the Liberal Democratic Party, they were the youth of the Communist Party in the 80s, and they were, let's say, liberal opposition to the communist, the more conservative Communist Party, like the new left opposition to the old left Communist Party in the 80s, and they transformed into Liberal Party. It was something back then suggested by Slavoj Žižek himself. He said the youth of the Communist Party, that was in the 90s, in the year 90, he said we should transform into a big middle liberal party to mark our territory. That is our territory. Liberalism right now is the stick to kill both kind of vampires that are coming at us, the nationalists and the old communists. So that was the Liberal Party. And at the beginning, you know, it was really good looking. If you look at their party membership and people who were there, it was like, you know, everyone from the list had something to show in his life besides from politics. They were academics, they were researchers, you know, really a lot of good people, but even party of that quality gets corrupted after 12 years in power. And I don't know, how to say, nobody sentimental, especially not Zizek. He would answer in the same way as I'm answering to you. It is good that the party died because
he was running for president.
He was running for them for president, yeah. He was more trolling them, really running for president, but he did, yeah. Okay. When he was running for president, he was praising Pol Pot and so on, just not to get elected.
Well, I'm afraid that nowadays he maybe could be elected just because of praising Pol Pot.
Okay, but to answer maybe a bit further, now that Social Democratic Party, which still exists, they are an interesting cup of tea. After the LDS died, a large part moved to social democracy. And then Social Democrats formed the government, and that government was maybe the worst government that Slovenia ever had. It was from 2009 to 2011. And what they did is they got a huge corruption affair because of new thermoelectrical plant that they built. It should be 600 million, but they managed to get up to 1 billion. Because of all the fees that had to be collected, of course. Then they didn't save the banks when they should, and we got into the second crisis and so on, so everything got wrong. But now they still exist, I would say, believe it or not, feeling this for Slovenian public as a kind of political zombie. They have no political platform, basically, or political ideology. If you talk to their insiders, they would say to you, the best for us is to be second in the elections, have someone else from some other party for prime minister, so you know our networks can work. So they are what the conspiracy theorists would call the deep state, you know. And I believe that it is always good when such parties die off and something new emerges. And don't be afraid of dying of all corrupted parties.
Thank you. So now I will open the floor to the questions of the audience.
Question to you. You're Polish, politically active, you're not in Parliament, as I understand, but
no,
almost there. I have a question to you. It's a bit on a personal note. In 2018, the Polish government made it a criminal offence to publicly incriminate Poland in the Holocaust. Then it backtracked on that decision and they said, okay, we're not going to give you 3 years in jail like we planned to. It's still an offence, but it's not a criminal one, it's a civil offence. Can you please explain to me, like, how did something like that happen? Because for me, it's just, it was really startling and it was really frightening because to see, you know, like, there's a lot of Holocaust revisionism now, which is code name for Holocaust denial, and seeing policies like that put forward, it makes that revisionism a lot more real. So, like, how do you feel about that? Like, what do you think about that? Your thoughts?
Nieszczęsne wypowiedzi dotyczące Holokaustu i to, że była tam ta ustawa związana z tym, że każdy, kto będzie Polaków, oskarży
okay, I'm sorry, because there's so many
things,
so many awful things the government does that I'm getting confused which one you're referring to. Like, why is it happening? Well, we have a nationalist government. They're nationalists, you know. So this is their framework of thinking, right? That the nation is like the sacrosanct of the community, right? So, and obviously, the Holocaust is like one of the most difficult topics when you discuss Polish people as a nation. In this framework, saying things like there were Polish people who were implicit in the Holocaust is an attack on the nation. I mean, it's nothing so.
It's very hard to explain in a leftist framework of
Exactly.
thinking.
You see, it's just, but it's not surprising at all. I mean, this is exactly what it is. I mean, the nation must be holy, in a way. So saying that somebody of Polish nationality did something wrong is just wrong. I don't know, like
There was another one reason, because in I would say Western public debate appear a kind of commentaries about the Polish national camps, the Polish concentration camps.
Yeah.
And it was a reaction against it. So, for example, it got a possibility, for example, to come to the Polish courts in this case that, for example, a German, I don't know, information agency or German filmmaker or something like that present this kind of narrative even in Germany, and so on and so on. It was a very, very, I would say, strange reaction, that it was on a based somehow on that.
Yeah, but
So they would like to avoid that this narrative developed and create something, I would say, without any sense. Yes.
Yeah, but it's just, this is what nationalists do. I mean, I know it's a very hard topic, and I maybe should not say it so lightly, but just, name one, I don't know, British nationalist who is happy to deal with colonialism, or I don't know, whatever.
Well, I mean, I think it's not, if you don't mind interrupting you, like, I don't necessarily, like, I'm South African. I come from a country where, like, we have very little national pride. If we had a little bit more, it would be very useful. I'm not really, because we've got plenty of reasons to divide ourselves, and I think national pride can actually, I mean, I know this might sound strange for a leftist to say, but as a leftist, I do think national pride can be very useful, and I even support it in certain instances. But, like, what I don't understand is, like, while the nation can be sacrosanct, and, I'm very happy when the whole of South Africa is cheering for our rugby team, that doesn't mean it's above criticism, and, like, instituting in law that it's above criticism, that's just, like, that's a bridge too far.
Well, yes, it is.
I mean,
What
if
can I say?
you would have been in parliament, you would not vote in favor.
Yes, of
I mean,
course.
so
I mean,
It was a really great debate about this Polish concentration camps, because concentration camps, it cannot be described as a Polish, because especially for a young generation, it's a kind of explanation that it was somehow organized by Polish people or something like that. And of course, that you could somehow discuss about it in a normal way, and not to try somehow to generate it a legacy. A legacy, it doesn't work, at least, because you cannot somehow acting on that base and get to the results that you expected. And the problem is that even in Poland there is a very huge problem to discuss about Holocaust, because any criticism, even in Lithuania, for example, it's even worse than in Poland. They try to speak about it in the Ukraine. Because it's clear that a lot of people, they were involved more or less in I would say this campaign against the Jewish people. It's clear that I would say it would take a long time that we get to the point that we would speak open about it.
Yeah, okay, funny, it's not funny, but the maybe interesting point here is that it led to a crisis with Israel, obviously, but because it led to a counter bill in Israel around a similar issue. And it's a paradox because obviously the Polish government and the Israeli government are best friends in a way because they are both nationalist governments and they collaborate pretty closely. It's just that this is how the paradox of right-wing internationalism works, right? So they stick together because they have right-wing views, but then they offend each other because they're nationalists. So it's pretty tricky to work together.
Maybe just a quick note to put this in context, as we are on an event that is co-organized by Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. The Polish government was removing a plaque dedicated to Rosa Luxemburg as well, as far as I know.
Yeah.
So they are involved in all kinds of revisionism actions, and they are not. You know, when someone from US, for example, asks me what's the difference between our government and the Polish government, I say Polish government is much more dangerous because they believe the stupid things they are saying. Our government doesn't; they are just businessmen. So, and that's, you know, that's the difference.
I would have a question. I have a question to Luka. As far as I know, you have or had some MEPs as well.
MEPs, no.
But you are a member of the European left.
Yeah.
How do you see the cooperation with them? How does it look like? What's your forecast?
Yeah, to be frank, the situation is very, very difficult in the European left. I believe that the trouble started with Tsipras, because before, you know, all the expectations were invested in Tsipras Syriza reform in Greece, and the European leaderships were smart enough when they actually won elections to see that if they allow Tsipras to succeed in Greece, they will have a surge of Podemos in Spain and so on. So they tried everything to finish him, and I believe that they made a fatal mistake because at some point they said, okay, you can lock us into a memorandum cage and we will do as you wish, we will obey. I believe that there the trouble started. What happened then? Then people like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, part of Podemos, part of others started to think about Lexit as a new left strategy that is left exit from Europe. And then within the European Union started, within the European left, started a clash between two clans. One left by German Die Linke for the most part, and the other one left by Mélenchon. So I would say that, if Europe is more or less marriage between France and Germany, the European left is collapsing exactly according to this line. But what is behind right now, I believe, is the difference I described between more traditional, nationalist and conservative social democracy, what is basically Mélenchon is trying to do. One of, I believe it was Didier Ribon, French sociologist, said, he described his transformation like this. In 2012, Mélenchon and his Parti de Gauche, they were marching under the red banner and singing Internationale 5 years later, they were marching under the tricolor and singing Marseillaise. So that is the transformation that happened there, and it started influencing also people like Zara Wagenknecht in Die Linke, who were starting to think about, okay, we now maybe have to revise our policies towards immigrants and so on, but the progressive part of the European left and also Die Linke was strongly against it. And now you have basically those clashes everywhere, and I cannot answer how this will end. In the meantime, we have a new resurgent Greens, and I believe that they are gaining the momentum that the left could with a more smart oriented agenda. So in Slovenia, we also had the problem. The party, I said before that those institutions are dead. You see, how to say, I'm a true follower of the things I said before. The institutions should die off. So the party that I belonged to before, the Initiative for Democratic Socialism, then merged into the left. The party today that I'm coordinator now. Within the Initiative for Democratic Socialism, we had, after Syriza, instantly two factions. I was leading the more progressive-leaning one, and the other side was arguing for Lexit and accusing the progressive part of becoming left liberals, because, you know, we should stay true to the class struggle, and class struggle is everything we do here. So the thing ended up with that part being rejected at the Congress, our part winning, joining the new party. So right now we are consolidated in that progressive agenda. But I believe that what we should really do right now is to rewrite our program that is Keynesian social democratic socialist with those issues from the new left, but we should put a new framework that would be more ecologically leaning and looking to a green future. So that is what we are currently doing. And I also believe that it is something that is maybe a way out of the crisis of the left, to try to leave the current struggles behind and recanalize its energies somewhere else.
I'm not sure who was first, so just starting because it's France. So
okay. I would like to maybe come back to the European election, if I may. Just if you have any quick comments, what happened there? I mean, you had a really strong candidate, right? And how come she didn't get in? Like, from your perspective, from the party view, and maybe a second short follow-up. As a progressive, maybe there's like this idealist side of me. I would like to ask: is there any debate within the party on universal basic income or any type of future towards universal?
Yeah. There was another question. Yeah. We are discussing about it, but I'm more in favor of thinking about some, let's say, material universal basic income in a way that your material, that we extend the current rights so much that no one will slip into poverty. We are trying to do that with that minimum income agenda that is now 400 euros in Slovenia. That is 2/3 of minimum wage almost. But we would have to think in the future how to make flat not only affordable but as a right for all. How to, you know, how to make life possible with the minimum input of work. I would say that this is the way how I would describe the way to, let's say, post-capitalist future. Not so much in Marxist sense of, I don't know, traditional images of communism, but more in a way what Keynes described in his essay to the grandchildren. He said, well, when capitalism will provide us with welfare, we will be able to live, we all will be able to live like the ruling classes lived in the past, or as the British aristocracy lives today, well off, but with minimum amount of work. He predicted 3 hours of work per day in 2030, but the rest of the day you will read poetry, watch Netflix.
Social engage.
And his follower, Robert Skidelsky, he has a quite interesting book on that issue that is called How Much is Enough? He's saying that, you know, currently in a capitalist constellation, we are all striving to realize ourselves or to become something through career. So everything is focused on career and the money you make, and that is basically who you are. Those two characteristics are speaking. And he says, well, we should think about how to replace that self-realization from the sphere of work into the sphere of free time, pastime. And that is something I'm interested in very much.
Last question, gentleman in glasses.
Michal Palenik, I'm from party called Progressive Slovakia. We are a member of ALDE group, which is now called a different name. When I was writing our program on the labor affairs, for example, on the topic of minimum wage, which you mentioned, our main political party, which dares itself to call social democratic, is making, for example, new minimum wage, which is to be very high, but according to statistics, some 10% of population of employees have a salary of 100 to 200 euros, which is well below minimum wage. How do you tackle these issues in your government when your political partner says one thing? For example, in your case it would be, yes, the minimum wage is 700, but then you realize that in reality it's not 700, and the 700 euros is just for the articles, for the newspapers. How do you tackle this small...
Sorry, what is the reason that the minimum wage is not 700? I didn't catch
it is in Slovakia 500 something.
Yeah.
However, 10% of employees have a salary of 100 euros or 200.
But why? You know, what's the mechanism?
Partial work, the euro is partial work. But it's a larger symptom of agreeing on something on paper, delivering in, but making the devil in the details, which basically negates all the paperwork. So how do you find these details?
In Slovenia we still have those cases, but there are two different issues. One is that the minimum wage in Slovenia was declared as the minimum payment you should get, not as the minimum full-time payment. You know, the difference is that in the minimum payment you can include overtime, night shifts, weekend work, and so on. So if you collect at the end 700, that's okay for the legislator and for the regulators. Even though if your basic salary is in fact 400 euros and you make additional 300 with those add-ons. So what we did with this law, that part will come we will not be it is accepted. The law is accepted, but it will be implemented. Will start. How is it called? The regulation will start then. Yeah, on the 1st January, we just said all the add-ons should be paid outside extra of the minimum wage. So the basic minimum wage should be 700, not the minimum payment. That is the first issue. You should exclude all the extras. The second is more complicated because it is related to precarity. We have, I don't know, like 15 types of work in Slovenia, and we have a lot to do there. We have quite a lot of projects, but they are more or less all currently rejected by the government because they are saying that we are over-regulating those types of work and that we are making, I don't know, student work non-competition, not competitive, yeah. And we are saying, we are answering no. All those types of work should be paid in hourly terms more than the minimum wage. The employer should not be rewarded for hiring someone on some irregular type of work instead of employing him for the full time. But to make this step, I'm afraid that we will have to maybe next mandate really take the Ministry of Social Affairs to push over this reform because the current government is really reluctant to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We will have now 15 minutes break for coffee or tea or whatever, and meet back here after 15 minutes.